Hi everyone, and welcome to this PowerPoint presentation about using Notebook for reflection. I'll be going through why we need to reflect at this time and also how we can use Notebook as a tool for that. So about me, I've worked at Hugh Bird College for over 4 years in both further education and higher education for 15 years now. I've previously been an AD at BMet and course leader at Liverpool City College. My subject specialism is fashion and contextual studies, and I have a master's in textiles. I'm now the course leader for the initial teacher training course in collaboration and partnership with the University of Central Lancashire. I have recently completed some master's research modules in education, and for some reason I'm about to embark on a doctorate. I'm also a mum of 4 children, aged 4 to 13, and this is the most important bit, I think, in this context, is that I am a bit of a reformed technophobe. So today's session outline is that we are going to describe the benefits of using Class Notebook for reflection, create an effective class notebook to enable reflection, or you will be able to hopefully by the end of this session, and you'll also be able to develop your reflective practice. So why is it important to develop our reflective practice? Well, it enables us to be even better teachers than we already are. We can use reflection to ask questions such as, are we really teaching our learners how we want to teach them? Are we reacting instead of reflecting? Are we really reacting in the moment rather than thinking, actually, is that the best way to approach this? Are we acknowledging our stresses and considering how to manage them? Bit of research that I've conducted on how the NHS has managed their organisation based on the stresses of COVID-19. We need to remember that organisations are alive as much as people, and like people, when experiencing stress or trauma, they react by going into survival mode. If the organisation and the people within it don't acknowledge the stresses and trauma they're experiencing, then it can get passed on to our learners, which is really the last thing we want, isn't it? So to alleviate this, reflection really is key. As reflective practitioners, you can support your colleagues by asking them the right questions and supporting them to reflect as well. Have a reflective mindset and appreciate and be mindful of your emotions at this time. Also your social interactions with one another and also with your learners. Focus on well-being of yourself and your learners and think about how that might impact the teaching and learning that's taking place. So you're probably all familiar with reflective theory, Sean Gibbs and Kolb's reflective cycles, but I think for this purpose, Rolf's adaptation here from 2001 is sufficient to prompt adequate reflection. The benefits of reflecting practice during COVID-19 are that it really does help you manage that mental health. There's a great quote here from Carol Dweck. In a growth mindset, challenges are exciting rather than threatening. So rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to reveal my weaknesses, you say, wow, here's a chance to grow. And I know a lot of people are quite anxious about the use of technology during this time, but this is such a great opportunity for us to learn these skills that we've always wanted to. Self-reflection is vitally important for learners to build resilience and for ourselves to enable better than expected outcomes in the face of adversity. And one thing that I've learned in these last 3 months is that actually this remote way of learning can really bring out the best in our learners. We might not always get it right in September, and that's okay. What's important is that we reflect on what works and what doesn't and learn from it. It's important to keep present with our vulnerabilities and really see this as an opportunity to grow. So that's my bit about reflection. I'm going to get to the nitty-gritty about why we're using Notebook to reflect. The great thing about Notebook is it's fully embedded in Teams, so it saves automatically. No more of students saying that they've lost their pen drive or their computer crashed and they lost everything. It's all saved automatically. It's one central place for learners to access. It can also be a collaborative space with the collaboration space that's embedded within Class Notebook. It builds literacy skills and encourages independence, and I'll talk further about that later on. The immersive reader ensures inclusivity as well, and that's probably my favourite tool. There's also the option to give direct feedback to learners, and that can be done through a variety of ways, again, through different tools that I'll show you later on. So there are many benefits of using OneNote or Class Notebook. And just to point out that Class Notebook sits within Teams, but it is part of the OneNote package. So you may be accessing it via Teams, but you can also access your Class Notebook via OneNote as well. Using Notebook for reflections allows the learner to be creative. Coming from a creative background myself, I think that's really important for me, but also obviously different learning styles, different preferences of learners to be able to manage their class notes as they would within a portfolio and reflect their own personalities within the work that they do. They can therefore present their reflections or whatever they're using Class Notebook for in whichever way suits them. So they can use photos, which can easily be taken and uploaded on their phones. They can record audio clips. They can share links to web pages and videos, online resources. That obviously supports referencing as well. By having it in Teams, they have a central location for all lesson input and equally lesson output. I'm not going to go through the hows and whys and what for of setting up a reflective space in terms of Class Notebook. There are many different videos out there, and I'll put some links up of how to set up a Class Notebook. But you do obviously do that within Teams. What I'll do at the end of this presentation is I'll go over to my screen share and I'll show you a set up Class Notebook and show you some of the tools in action. Just wanted to pose a question as well about staff notebooks, because in many teams that I'm in, and I'm in quite a few across college and within UCLan, we don't really utilise that staff notebook as much as we could be for a depository for resources, but also as a space to reflect with one another and collaborate. So here are some examples from my trainee teachers of the way that they've used Class Notebook to reflect. Obviously, as part of their PGCE, they do have to put together a reflective journal. And for the last 2 years, we've done that within Class Notebook really successfully. And it's evolved and students have found different ways that they prefer to use it. So they've all given permission for me to share this information with you. And there are 6 different examples and they're all very different. So this is the first example of a learner utilising Class Notebook in a traditional sense, in that she's done a traditional reflective journal, handwritten it, taken a photo and uploaded it. Then in contrast to that, we have a tutor here who is a maths tutor, and it's quite a methodical way of representing her reflective journal. So she's created a table within Class Notebook and then uploaded and written into directly, her table as she's gone along. This example is where a learner has just written directly into Class Notebook, but then also supported that with some imagery. I've then left a comment for the learner to say that I like what they've done here, and obviously it automatically has my initials there to show them who's written the comment. I've highlighted it so that they can see it directly as soon as they go into their notebook. This is an example of a learner who has kept their reflective journal on a Word document, and then they've uploaded that Word document as a file printout. This is then a flat image, like a screenshot or a PDF of the Word document, so it can't be edited or amended. And so the difficulty with this one is that if they're using a Word document, you might not be able to see any updates until they've uploaded that. There is a different way of using a Word document in Teams, which I'll show you a bit later. This was a very creative learner, so she was teaching media studies, and she's similar to the first one, has handwritten hers but made it even more creative and then just taken photos, and again I've left a comment there for the learner to see. This one is probably one of my favourites, so an example of a learner voice recording via the audio option in Class Notebook, and I'll let you hear a little snippet of that now.
Okay, so I am currently doing my roles and responsibilities essay assignment, and I'm finding that we're doing well, Lucy's really good at making sure that we cover everything that we need in our assignment in our lessons, so I'm finding that really helpful because all of the tasks that we've done so far are pretty much what we need to include into our assignments, which is really, really useful. And I think she's doing it without kind of telling us that. So when you look back, you're like, oh, that can be in my assignment. Whereas she doesn't actually.
I'll just pause that there. So I think the reason I like this especially, and it doesn't work for every learner, but the reason I like this is because you can hear the way the learner feels. Whilst that might be lost within a written version of a reflective journal. So she could have written this and then edited it so that it didn't feel quite as emotive. But that first pause, that first sigh really lets me know how she's feeling, as well as obviously the content. So just some questions here for you to ponder over. You have looked at the 6 different examples, and I want you to think about which way would work best for your learners. But actually, there is an argument that a multimedia approach or a multimodal approach is best, and I'll show you some examples of that a bit later. Would you use a template for this? So if you have your awarding body perhaps, or the module descriptor, could you use that as a template for how the learner reflects? Especially with maybe first year learners or new learners, you might want to give them a template to start with, rather than just a blank page. And then importantly, how often do you ask your learners to reflect? If it's not part of their modules, is it something that you should be doing? And likewise, how often do you reflect? Using Teams and Class Notebook really gives us the opportunity to empower learners. And as we know, learners are probably a lot more tech savvy than we are in many respects. And you can empower them by showing them how to use their mobile phones for this purpose. So if they download both the Teams app and the Class Notebook or OneNote app, then that gives them the facility to be able to record and document their reflections, and again anything else they need the Class Notebook for or their portfolio for. They can use their phone to record all of that. So this is an example of a screenshot of what the app would look like when they've gone into their Class Notebook. So if they set up a page, or you've set up a page for them about reflections, there's an opportunity directly in the tools to take a picture, so with this camera icon here, and also to record audio. So they could be sat at a bus stop waiting for the bus and be reflecting on their day, on their placement, and audibly record their thoughts. And it's in the moment, and that's great. Make sure, as I've said, that they've got both the apps downloaded, because it does jump from Teams into the other app to access the Class Notebook. If they've got a stylus and an iPad or a tablet, then they can also use a stylus to handwrite into their Class Notebook as well, and I'll show you some examples of that when we go over to the live version. So this is just where the audio button is, and I will show you within Teams, and I'm going to go on to talk about the immersive reader now as well, which sits within the View tab here. So the benefits of immersive reader for both reflections and just in general. Using Immersive Reader enables your learners to have the text that they've written read back to them, meaning that they can self-check and proofread their own documents, whether it be reflections or an essay, for example, for spelling and grammar, but also for fluency. So it helps them improve their own fluency, helps them understand where there needs to be punctuation by listening to that voice recording. It also therefore supports learners with learning difficulties, particularly dyslexia, as they can dictate their text and customise the settings to be personal to them. So, for example, different coloured backgrounds, different fonts and different font sizes. It can also support learners who are speakers of other languages. So if English isn't their first language, it can translate your documents over into their language, and it can also dictate from themselves in many different languages and then translate it into English. So that's a really useful tool as well. The collaboration space in Notebook is an area for learners to discuss and work together on activities. It's a great space to share critical incidents or perhaps positive experience that they've had with the rest of the group and get some further input and really use that reflective cycle. That could be done in the post section of Teams, but quite often things get missed and lost within posts. People don't reply to threads and set up new discussions, and the collaboration space and likewise the class notebook is always the best place to conduct work as such. There are many other apps that work well with Class Notebook and Teams. Two that I like to use specifically for reflective practice are MindMeister, which you can embed and add as a tab within Teams, and I'll show you that when we flip over to the live version, and Flipgrid is great as well. So Flipgrid gives you the ability to be able to watch a clip, to record a clip of the learner, or the learner to record a clip of themselves, and it's normally a short clip, so anything from 30 seconds to 2 minutes, and you can give them a task. So you could say, for example, record the 3 things you want to develop this year. I'll just go over to an example of that if I can. No, I'll do that in a second at the end of the presentation. There's a QR code here actually, so you can scan this on your phone. Any smartphone will enable you to scan the QR code directly from your camera, and that will link directly to the Flipgrid, so you can do that in your own time. So there are a couple of negatives. I've talked about the positives, but there are a few little negatives, not many. The major one for me is that there is some lagging and syncing that might happen when you're using the collaboration space. So although it is a live document and learners, if you're doing blended learning, this works really well. So you can have someone in the classroom working on something with somebody who's sat at home. And they can collaborate on a document, but there are some lagging and syncing errors, and mostly that's because the Wi-Fi probably isn't very good where the person is sat at home, and so it might just take a few minutes to become live as such. But that's going to be the same with any platform you use, and that's not necessarily Microsoft's fault. It's probably more to do with the Wi-Fi, as I say. But other than that, I really don't think there are any other negatives. In the 3 months that I've been using this, well, we've been using it for 2 years, but obviously in lockdown during these 3 months, that's been the only issue that I've had. And the great thing about Microsoft is they're brilliant at taking on feedback from teachers and lecturers and acting on it quite quickly. So what and what next? Thinking about that reflective cycle, what are you going to do with this information next? The next thing really would be for you to create a space for reflection and connection for you and your learners. So that would be within your class notebook. Then to reflect on your experiences over the last 3 months and perhaps record it somewhere within a class notebook or a staff notebook. Experiment in the team and with the suggested apps that I've given, and I'll show you examples of the type of things you can experiment with in a minute. And don't forget to explore other apps as well. What I find useful, you may not, and you might find ones that suit you, your learners, and your subject better. As I mentioned, I'm not going to go through the ins and outs of how to set up a class notebook, but there is a link here with a YouTube video that shows you how to do that. Also, Microsoft Educator page has many different modules on using Teams and Class Notebook, and this is one of the ways that I taught myself to be confident in using the tools. Just play and experiment whenever you get the chance, and this is the link to the Microsoft Education page. There is a forms quiz here for you to complete, so I can gain some feedback on this, and also just a quiz to show that you've listened during this presentation. So thank you. I will now flip over to the Teams page and we'll have a look at some of the tools. So this is the class notebook that I've set up, and in the content library, which is the space where you can share things like handouts with your learners, I've just created a little tab with tools, and if you look in here, it's got an example of how we can use all the tools that I mentioned. So you've got the YouTube option of embedding a YouTube video. Really simply, you don't have to go to insert or embed or anything, you literally just take the YouTube URL and paste it into the page. So when you click onto the class notebook, you always need to make sure there's a bounding box. Wherever you are, you can just click on it and it will paste whatever you've copied. So in this instance, I've taken the URL for this YouTube video, which is about reflective mindset. I'll just delete that. And it will then automatically play within the class notebook. There we go. You can also do an audio recording. So for this purpose, you need to go to Insert and Audio. Do bear in mind that once you click audio, it starts recording straight away, so be ready when you press the button. And this is the quality of it here.
Hey everyone, it would be great if you could watch this video before next week's session. We'll then have a discussion about it in the lesson. Thanks, bye.
Okay, so that's an example of video and audio. Really easy, really simple. And obviously it's great for learners, especially when they're isolated at home or in halls of residence, for them to be able to hear your voice. So I've talked about immersive reader quite a lot already, but I'll just show you an example of that. So when using immersive reader, you need to go into View, select immersive reader, and it will open it up in the immersive reader preference. So it will save your preferences, which is great for learners who use this frequently, but you can change them if you want as well. So if you prefer a yellow background, for example, different font size, font size and font, or to increase the space size between it. As I mentioned, it will read the text out for you.
The one tool that I would recommend you share with your learners above all others.
And there are many other options in here as well. So you can choose a language to translate that to, as I mentioned earlier. And then you can also get it to show things like nouns, verbs, adjectives. So as I said, it's not only a great tool for learners with learning difficulties, but it also helps learners with perhaps lower level literacy skills or low academic skills. I've used it really successfully with my learners this year as a proofreading tool. Okay, so that's the immersive reader. I mentioned the dictate button as well. So we go to the home section. This is the dictate button here. And again, it is great. It will dictate what you tell it to. You do have to tell it when you want punctuation, so commas and full stops, or new lines, new paragraphs. It's not perfect, so for example here where I've said commas, it's changed it to commerce, but it's a great choice for learners to have what I would always say is that they need to then go back over it and proofread it, obviously, and correct any errors, as with any dictation tool, really. But as a free piece of software within the Teams platform, previously we would have used Drag and Dictate, for example. This is great to have it here embedded within the Teams. You can use drawing as well, so you can copy and paste images into here, as I've done with this triangle. You could then type some instruction. Sorry, these are from previous trainings that I've shown, so I'll just delete those. And then you can ask learners to draw directly in here. Obviously, if they've got a stylus, it's going to be neater than just drawing it freehand with the mouse, but it is possible. So the task is to circle which angle is greater than 90 degrees, and then they can just do that themselves. This is me writing without the stylus. You can see it's not great, but it is possible. I've just left this here as an example, so an opportunity to give some informal feedback, formative feedback to your learners via stickers. And I know in HE, even at postgraduate level, learners still love a sticker. I still love a sticker, so don't dismiss the stickers. There are many random options like these, but these ones are the ones I like, where you can change the text. So, for example, great progress on your understanding of angles, and then you can insert that. It may just take a little minute. There we go. So these are nice when you just want to let a learner know that you've looked at their homework perhaps, or you looked at their portfolio and that you've identified some good work. Likewise, you could leave some comments for development as well. Do bear in mind when you're in the draw tool that you need to come out of that before you move on to anything else. So it's just this little icon here. You can embed Microsoft Forms into Class Notebook as well. So like we did with the YouTube clips, you can just copy and paste the URL for the form that you've created in MS Forms, and that will leave the questionnaire here, or the quiz if you've created a quiz, and they can complete it here. You can the feedback will then directly go back to your Microsoft Forms page. Unfortunately, it doesn't enable you to embed a Kahoot, but like with anything, you can leave a URL and it will jump to the web page when they click on it. Learners might, for different subject areas, you might need the use of tables. So you can insert, and there's the table option here, again having to go into a bounding box first. So if anything's ever greyed out, it's probably because you've not clicked and created a bounding box first. And then you can just delete them if you create one by mistake. These little stars and these little checks here, they can be done via this tab here, tags. So you've got lots of different things like questions, websites to visit, and so on. So you could have a play about with those. Just scroll all the way down. And you can get learners to tick when things are done. Another embedded YouTube video there, some further reading, so I've used the little book icon, some further watching, so the website icon, and then some questions that I've posed for them. This is my new favourite app, so it's called ThingLink, and this is one that I've created about dyslexia. So you can create little buttons, find an image that you want to use, create little buttons on it that learners can click on. So the question one, you can pose a question, like for example here, how can you use technology to support your learners with dyslexia? Discuss in your groups. You can link to YouTube videos, so that will jump to the web page. You can embed Microsoft form quizzes. You can get them to jump to a Flipgrid. You can include quotes, etc., and other imagery, and that can also go full screen directly from the Class Notebook. So I like this again, I think, because I'm a visual person and a creative person, and I think especially for learners who have something like dyspraxia or dyslexia, having the content all there, if we'd have given this as one large document, it could have been quite overwhelming. But because it's broken down into the separate buttons and it's very visual and they can do it at their own pace, I think it's much more user friendly. So sways, you can utilise Class Notebook to share your sways. So like we did with the YouTube videos and anything else that's enabled to be embedded within Class Notebook, you just copy and paste the URL and it will automatically share it here. And they are able to scroll through the sway and read it at their own pace. Oh, you can also, if you've got a bank of PowerPoints, for example, that because PowerPoint doesn't embed this way within Class Notebook, unfortunately, but you can convert your PowerPoints into Sway. So you just need to upload them to Sway. It will automatically convert them. You may just need to double check that everything works, and then you can upload the Sway here. For those of you who might need the maths tool, I am not a maths expert by any means, but this is my example of me working with my 10-year-old on some maths for his 11 plus revision. So we were working on BODMAS, and what you can do is highlight the equation and then go to Insert and press the Maths button, and it will give you the option of an action. If you click on Evaluate, it will work out the equation for you. So this is great for if you're giving learners some work to work on independently and they get stuck, for example, they can use this maths tool. Do be aware that they can obviously use the maths tool to solve the equation. But the great thing is it then also gives the solution steps. So it shows the learner how it got to that. And then it can even generate a practice quiz via MS Forms for them to work on. So there's lots of different ways of using this maths tool. And on the Microsoft Education page that I shared earlier, there's some specific training for this if it's something that you'd want to explore further. So this is an example. Sorry, I'm just going to have a quick drink. This is an example that I've taken from OneNote.com, which shows you how you could use all these different tools on one page. So this is how light works and creating a torch for a STEM project. So it's got the video and an image, some goals using the little tags, some questions, a table that the learner needs to fill in, a space for them to draw a simple circuit using the draw tools, and then a sway explaining how they need to create their own. And then a link to a document that they need to fill in at the end to show what they've achieved. And obviously they could upload photos of what they've done of the end product. So I thought this was a great example of how you could use it. If you scroll across, remembering that this isn't A4, every page within the Class Notebook is limitless. So you're not bounded to that A4 space. You could keep going across, scrolling across and scrolling down. It's completely limitless. And there are examples of how you do all these things on the right here. So I'm just going to flip back to the collaboration space here and show you an example of how you would use the collaboration space. So you might split your group into two or more. So I've got a group A space and a group B space here. And I've set a little task. So I've said, look at the Gibbs model of reflection below, discuss as a group how this differs to Kolb's model. I've put a tick box to say when they've done it, label in where Kolb's steps would appear on this cycle. And then you can see the difference here in the text when it's used with a stylus. So it's much nicer in comparison to here, for example, where it's been used with the draw tool directly with the mouse. But it can be used both ways. So great if they've got access to a tablet or iPad and a stylus, but it's not a requirement. So that's one example of what you might ask a group to do. And then another example is by embedding a Word document. And it's just logged me out. So ordinarily this would be logged in. It's just because I haven't been on it for a while, and that would show the Word document here. I'll try and come back to that in a moment. So that's pretty much it with Class Notebook. If you do have any questions, please do email me. It's lucy.harding@hubaird.ac.uk. Hopefully that's helped you with both setting up a Class Notebook, thinking about how you can use it for reflection or a portfolio, for example, and being a bit more creative with the tool. Thank you.